Hello, hello, and we meet again. And we're in Daniel, and it's starting to get interesting, I have to say. And you probably will see the dates of putting these on the internet kind of like probably get a little wider because the water gets deeper and deeper. And so that's what's going to happen tonight. There's going to be a shift. There's going to be three shifts tonight with Daniel 7. We do three shifts. Next chapter will be one more shift. That'll be back into Hebrew because this is the last chapter in Chaldean. But there's three shifts tonight, so you just kind of like getting you warmed up for it. The first one is a shift in chapter sequence. This Daniel 7, even though it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it should be back around chapter 4 somewhere, because there's some of the earlier visions. We'll talk about that. That's a shift as well. And so there's and my notes here are messed up. Let me fix my notes. Can't see my notes. There we go. That's better. And so there's also a shift in time. Let me get this here. Just go like that. I have a touch screen, so I can just move it like that. There we go. Sorry about that. Just getting my screen good. But there's also a shift in time from Daniel's life to his visions, and the visions are of the future. Eschatology is the study of last things, and so we go from his present to eschatology. Daniel 7, I have never read so much. You know, that's the thing too. You know, I've been through Daniel before. I've been through Revelation like 3 times. Somebody else teaching it. And the same thing with Daniel. I've sat at the feet of somebody teaching through Daniel. And I thought I pretty much understood Daniel, and I thought I understood Revelation. But when you start to get into digging deep into Daniel, you're gonna pretty much have. I mean, if you look at and I always put that in the comment section down below. I put the verses that I went through in case you ever want to refer to. Where did he said something in this particular chapter and verse? Where was that? And they're all down below in the comment section. But if you look in the comment section, it's like Revelation, 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 Daniel, 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 Revelation, Revelation. I'm just jumping around back and forth between Daniel and Revelation. There's some other stuff in there as well, but really Daniel and Revelation are like this. And sometimes I think Daniel's like the 30,000 foot view, and Revelation is the nap of the earth. You know, it's like down and close and personal, but Daniel gives you the big look, and so you're going to see that. So like I said, shift number 1 is chapter sequence. Shift number 2, Daniel's life to Daniel's visions, and shift number 3 is from man's perspective to God's perspective. And so I'll give you, for example, the dream that Daniel gave the interpretation of to Nebuchadnezzar, of the head of gold, and the chest and the arms of silver, and the belly and the thighs of bronze, and the legs and the feet of iron, and the feet were like mixed with clay and iron. You know, it was an image of a man, and they were precious metals. And so that was a man's vision. With these chapters here in Daniel, we're going to get God's viewpoint. You know, the point of view makes all kinds of difference. And where man's vision is precious metals, and it's, somewhat, I don't know, positive, I guess would be the word. From God's point of view, we're going to see beasts. These 4 empires are going to be translated to beasts, and so it's going to be there's 3 shifts in there. So just be heads up for them. So let's get started. So it's in the first year, the chapter 7, verse 1. The first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head while on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream, telling the main facts. And I thought that was interesting too, that he's telling the main facts. So he's not going to get into the weeds. John will get into the weeds. But Daniel is telling the main facts. And I guess that'd be a nice way to summarize the chapter. You probably don't remember the Dragnet, but just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. Two detectives, Anyways, verse 2. Daniel spoke, saying, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. Okay, so the four winds, and I suppose those four winds are being stirred up by heaven, because Revelation 7:1 talks about how heaven uses the wind, how there were angels that basically had stopped the wind, four angels that stopped the wind. And there's a great sea. And the great sea, I think there's two things. The great sea and coming up from this sea are two different seas, I believe. The Great Sea is the Mediterranean, and all of the empires that are going to be talked about touch the Mediterranean, as does Israel. And so, but the coming up from the sea, I think, is the sea of humanity. These empires that come up from humanity, and they're going to be four beasts. Okay, so here we go with the first one, verse 4. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I watched till its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up. I'm going to key in on that lifted up there. I think that's kind of interesting. From the earth, and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. So this is the first beast, and this is the Chaldeans. We kind of know this from an earlier thing. It says, and so the winged lion. Interestingly enough, in Babylon, and you can go to the Louvre, and I've seen this. As a matter of fact, I think it's in the basement of the Louvre. So if you go to the Louvre, I almost missed it. I took high school kids there some time ago, and I thought I'd seen the whole Louvre, and then one of my students says, "Man, Mr. Crouch, did you see the basement?" The basement? Yeah, the basement. It was really cool. And so I went down. I ran through. I had like the Louvre was going to close like in half an hour, and I ran through the basement because I had to see it, and it was just incredible. One of the things that are down there is stuff from Babylon, and in particularly, there's a winged lion down there in the basement. I thought, and now I got to go back to the Louvre. I got to see this stuff again. Now that been around history and taught history for a number of years, I got to go back and see some of the stuff. I'd love to go back to the Louvre. But anyways, some translations say lioness, which means a little more fiercer. But this thing was fierce. It's a lion. These are attacking beasts. These are gosh, I don't know what the word is. I want to say, like, I think of birds of prey, but these are attacking beasts. But anyways, I'm short of words tonight. But this particular winged lion was an emblem on the gates of Babylon, and it's in the Louvre, and you can go see it. But its wings are plucked off, and that goes right back to Daniel 4:33. It says, that very hour the word was fulfilled concerning Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven from men and ate grass like oxen. So if you remember that episode where Nebuchadnezzar is turned into a beast, okay, and then for a period of 7 years, he's stuck in that transformation. But at the end, I'm going to go back to that where it says in verse 4, I watched till its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up. So the wings are plucked off, and it's lifted up. Well, you go back and you read Daniel 4:34. This is at the end of time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my understanding returned to me. And I can't help but get this picture. If you look at the Daniel of 7:4 and the Daniel of 4:34, there's a lifting that takes place. And Nebuchadnezzar begins to praise God when he's lifted up, and his eyes are lifted up. He begins to praise God, and it's just, God is the lifter of our heads. And it's kind of, when I initially had read Daniel 4:34, I was thinking, he's getting picked up and he looks up. But in reality, I think he was lifted up in order to see who was lifting him up. And that's why he praised him. And that's why he recognized God. And what's interesting about this beast, the first beast and the fourth beast are two different beasts, because this beast is transformed into a man. It gets a man's heart. And that's why it's the head of gold. But that's Nebuchadnezzar. So Nebuchadnezzar becomes, in essence, born again. And so, but I think that was kind of cool. This is the one beast that's transformed into a man. And you're going to find out the fourth beast is totally different. Daniel's going to tell us that over and over and over again. The fourth beast is different. The fourth beast is different, but I would tell you the first beast is different too, because the first beast became a man. Verse 5, and suddenly another beast, a second like a bear. It was raised up on one side and had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And they said thus to it, arise, devour much flesh. Okay, so the second beast is the Persians. In my bet, this would be Xerxes. Xerxes the first was an interesting cat. And so why a bear? And yet, why the Persians as a bear? Strong army, really strong army, and so very destructive army. And so I would think the bear would be very suited for that. Raised up on what sides? You have to understand the Persians and the Medes. The Medes were the original shareholders, so to speak, of that region. And the Persians, there's going to be a gentleman who's going to come along, and his name escapes me. It's not Darius. I don't think it's Darius. But anyways, a gentleman's going to come along. He's a Persian. He's going to marry a Mede princess and basically tie the Persians and the Medes together. But eventually, the Persians rise to the top and kind of leave the Medes in the dust. But so originally the Persian and Medes, the Medes are the first, Persians join, and then the Persians end up, and so that's why I think it's raised up on one side. I think it's referring to the Persians. 3 ribs in its mouth. You have to understand that the Persians conquered 3 places. They conquered, obviously, Babylon, that we just heard about. They conquer Egypt, and they conquer Lydia, which is Turkey. And so that's the places. And so this was kind of interesting. I just kind of stumbled on this today. I thought that was kind of interesting. And I'm going to leave these verses for you to go look up because I didn't want to read them. There's a whole bunch, but it says, and they said thus to it, arise and devour much flesh. I think that was the company that was in heaven that was speaking at that point is the one that said that. And the reason why I say that, and I found this today, like I said, go read Isaiah. Well, let me back up and first and tell you what it is. God has judgment that He executes on some of these empires, on places on the earth, that have done wrong. He executes judgment on them, and He uses the Persians to do it. And so when it's devour much flesh, go read. Some of these are kind of like, ooh, God's wrath, and I'm kind of off on a tangent here, so I might as well stay off on a tangent. God's wrath is something you want to miss. It is something you want to miss. And I was going to say this at the end, but I'll say it now. Daniel 7 is a warning. It's a warning of God's wrath that's coming, but it's also a comfort. It's a comfort in that you can miss it. If you are born again, as I am born again, I'm not going to be here for this. I am teaching on this. I am telling you about this. But more than anything else, I want to warn you, skip the wrath of God. Because in the tribulation, God's wrath is going to be poured out. And you don't want to be here for this. If you hear nothing else with the Daniel's chapters that come here, learn and hear this. Skip the wrath of God. Anyways, I digress. I don't digress, but these verses that I'm going to give you here talk about God executing using the Persians to execute God's wrath. And that's Isaiah 13, 17 and 18, Isaiah 56, 9, Jeremiah 50, 21 through 32, and Ezekiel 39, 17 through 20. And those are down in the comments if you want to, if I went through those too fast. But God is a loving God. That's the God who offered His Son for you and me as payment for our sins so that we could spend eternity with Him. That's the God you need to know. Okay? Keeping on track here, verse 6. After this I looked, and there was another like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Okay, so this is Alexander the Great. This one's probably like the easiest one to kind of decipher, if there is. The leopard, it's a fast attacker. Alexander the Great, 13 years I think it took him to conquer his empire. 13 years. And the gentleman was young. I don't think he even had any kids. Matter of fact, I'm positive he didn't have any kids because when he dies, he has nobody that he leaves it to. But he has 4 generals, and his empire is divided into 4 parts. So it makes sense. 4 wings, 4 heads. Basically, the 4 wings, it went fast and went far, all over the place. And when there's 4 generals that they divided up at the end. So that one, I thought that one was fairly easy. Verse 7. And after this, I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast. There was number 4. This one's I told you is going to be different. Dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. And so Daniel's going to say this many times. It's different from the other beasts, and there's a lot of differences in this beast. And so part of it is this beast, I believe, spans time. Whereas the beasts were empire, empire, empire. This is a beast that brackets Israel's when Israel is dissolved in 70 A.D. And so this beast is the Roman Empire that starts on one side of Israel, and it's after Israel's established, it's that whole European Roman Empire area. The beast is going to be resumed. Okay, so this beast covers basically from the Roman Empire to the tribulation. All right. Dreadful, terrible, and exceedingly strong. Revelation 12 talks about a dragon, and that I think that one sounds pretty good. And it's got iron teeth too. Daniel 2:40 said, "The 4th kingdom shall be as strong as iron, insomuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all others." Why 10? Why 10? There's 10 horns, okay? And so I'm going to tell you, I'm a history guy. I love history. Love, love, love history. And so I was like, gosh, I'm going to solve this. I'm going to be the one guy that solves the 10. And you can't. You can't. I looked at the Roman Empire, and then it turns into the Holy Roman Empire, but that's while Israel's not existing. And so then I looked at, when World War II ends, shortly thereafter, the European Union emerges, and there's a group of 10. And I was like, but it quickly changes, and I don't know how many there are now, but there's a lot more than 10 now. The only thing I did find that's somewhat interesting is there's 10 monarchies that still exist in Europe. That was the only thing I could find, but 10. But I think a lot of this, and this is what I'm going to leave some breadcrumbs for those of you who I'm not going to be born again, Jim. You can't convince me. But later on, when I'm gone, and you go, oh man, I want to go back and listen to what Jim was teaching on, because I need to know. I need to know, because I'm going to be living through that tribulation where God's wrath is poured out, and I want to get to know God. I want to know that loving God that Jim spoke about. Well, here's your first indicator, okay? If you're looking for the Antichrist and you want to know what's going on, the first indicator is look for a group of 10, okay? Look for a unit of 10 governments coming together. That's your first indicator. I'll give you a few more indicators, but that's indicator number 1. Verse 8. And I was considering the horns, and there was another horn. Oh, anyways, this beast has got 10 horns, by the way. I probably skipped over that. And I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one coming up among them, before whom the 3 of the first horns was plucked out by the roots, and there in the horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. Okay, so you're going to have this one horn. Okay, so there's 10 horns, and then a little horn pops up, and it's a man. Okay, so these other are kingdoms, kings or kingdoms, and this one's a man. Okay, and so that one is going to take out 3. So that's your second indicator. So if you're around the tribulation and you're like going, okay, there's a group of 10 nations. Oh, this guy just took out 3 of them. Oh, then that's the Antichrist. That's the Antichrist. So that's your second indicator for those that are looking. And another way to nail him is he will speak pompous words. He will actually declare himself God. This is 3.5 years into the tribulation, but he's going to be a charismatic speaker. People are going to be wowed by him, but his words are going to go against God. And that's why he can do this, because the church, the believers, me, have been taken out. And otherwise we wouldn't be like putting up with it. The word, when he basically, whatever he says that's, against God or professes to be God, people like me like, oh no, that's the Antichrist. Look, it's in Daniel. It's in Daniel chapter 7, verse 8 right here. He's speaking pompous words. That's him. But you're going to have to be that person. But interesting too, I find this in Revelation 13:2. There's elements of the other beast within the Antichrist. Okay, and so now the beast. It's Revelation 13:2. It says, "Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard." Okay, so it was like a leopard. So remember, that's Alexander the Great. So he's like a leopard. Perhaps he's young. Okay, his feet were like the feet of a bear. So remember, the Persians were militarily ruthless. So he has an army, perhaps, or has that a military background, perhaps. This is me just supposing. Okay, this is not anything. I find this fascinating. It's like solving a puzzle. And his mouth like the mouth of a lion. Okay, and Nebuchadnezzar had some wisdom. He knew what was going on. So perhaps there was a amount of wisdom. And the dragon gave him power and his throne and great authority. All right, and so he is the beast, but he has elements of the other empires in him. So verse 9, I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. That's God the Father, by the way. I think it is God the Father. I'm pretty sure that's God the Father. Anyways, his garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was a fiery flame, its wheels a burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. 1,000 thousands ministered to him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. And I think that's one of those people is going to be me. The court was seated and the books were opened. And so we get this glimpse into heaven, a bit intimidating. You got God the Father seated. I like the whole imagery of the fire. He's seated on a fiery flame, on top of flames with like lava pouring out. And God uses fire a lot in imagery, in presenting himself. He does that in fire. You think about the burning bush in Exodus 3:2. That was God. He was in a burning bush. We often think about trials as purification process, fiery trials. Malachi 3:2 talks about God being a refiner's fire and basically burning the junk out of us. And so that's kind of an interesting thing too. You think about the Exodus 40:38. You talk about the Israelites going through the desert, and he was a pillar of fire by night to guide them. And also fire is used for judgment, as in this chapter. So the court is seated and the books are opened. We're about to get down to business here. And so verse 11, I watched then because of the sound of the pompous words which the horn was speaking. I watched till the beast was slain and its body destroyed and given to the burning flame. As for the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away. Yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. Okay, so the beast is going to come to a fiery end. And that's also talked about. Remember I told you, Daniel doesn't put in all the details, but John does. John actually elaborates on that whole part where he said, I watched till the beast was slain and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. John talks about that in Revelation 19:20. Then the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet who worked signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. These two were cast alive into the lake of fire, burning with brimstone. Ouch, that's gotta hurt. And so the other thing too, I think he's circling around here with verse 12. I think he's kind of circling around. And once again, Daniel tells us over and over again the difference of the fourth beast. And the fourth beast comes to an immediate end on this in this chapter here, in what we were just reading here. Whereas the other beasts, the other empires, slowly died out. They weren't killed off by God. I mean, if you think about it, the Babylonians came to a slow death, actually at the hand of the Persians, and then the Persians came to kind of like a slow death. It's kind of interesting. The last Persian leader that Alexander the Great conquered, actually, it was kind of a weird thing. He actually runs away there's a battle with Alexander, and he runs away. They later capture him, and I think the Persians even kill him and bring him back to Alexander. So they're kind of like sickly and dying, and they're kind of consumed by the following empire, and so they become part of the empire. So there's the people there are kind of engulfed. You could even think of that as Syrians, but I digress. Verse 13. I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man. Wow, that's cool. I'm going to talk more about that. Coming with the clouds of heaven. Once again, that's a short little snippet that John, I'm going to show you. I'm going to read what he just said there. Behold, one like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. I'm going to give you a little bit more from what John said in Revelation. John builds off that, gives us more detail. One like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient of Days. So he came to God the Father. And they brought him near before him. Then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom, the one which shall not be destroyed. Okay, so first off, I want to introduce a couple words here. You kind of like, sometimes you throw these words around, and you're like, I think I know what they mean, but I don't know what they mean. And I always bounce stuff off of Sandra. It's like, what's a kingdom? What's a dominion? And I think she got 2 for 2, but I didn't get 2 for 2. And so I figured I'd share those with you. So the difference, because you're going to see there's a lot of kingdoms and dominions talked about here in Daniel. It's been in the past, but this chapter in particular, there's a lot of dominion and kingdom conversation. So let's make sure we understand. A kingdom is a region ruled by a king. Okay, so kingdom inherently has a king with it, a ruler. Now, dominion is the power to rule over that area. So dominion is authority. Kingdom is territory. Authority and territory. Make sense? Okay. So I can clear that up. Because there was a whole bunch of dominions and kingdoms tossed in there just there. And so you might want to go back and reread that. Now you go, okay, territory, authority. Got it. Okay. So I'm going to, spoiler alert, Daniel's going to be upset. It's going to talk about it twice in this chapter. And I think that right there, I have 3 theories. 1, 2, 3. 3 theories on why, what upset Daniel. What upset Daniel? Because Daniel's when we read verse 15, you're going to find out Daniel's upset. He's upset right after he just said what he said in verse 13. That's my first theory, okay? My first theory of what upset Daniel, theory number 1, is not aware that God had a son. Theory number 1. Okay. And one like the Son of Man. Okay, so the Gospels record 78 times that Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man. And it's almost like, I couldn't help but think he's as he's talking to people. And this is in the Gospels, and this isn't, I don't know, I didn't sift through it and say, okay, how many times did Jesus actually say it? In the Gospels, it's 78 times. But a lot of scenarios are repeated in the 4 Gospels. So maybe this Son of God is this Son of God, which is this Son of God. Maybe, anyways. So maybe not as many times, but still, Jesus did not hide the fact that he identified himself as the Son of Man, almost indicators like, hey, you guys are reading Daniel, and you heard about Daniel and the Son of Man. That's me. I am the Son of Man. And so I thought that was kind of cool. I could almost see him just winking. It's like, I'm the Son of Man. Anyways, so here's okay. So that part there where one like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. Okay, so that's all Daniel gives us. He doesn't give us all the details. He told us at the beginning he wasn't going to give us all the details. But if we go to John in Revelation, he gives us some more details, and that's why I'm thinking that my upset, I call it upset Daniel theory number one, is that he wasn't aware that God had a son. But that little snippet that he gives there, coming with the clouds of heaven, listen to how John presents that, because John is just like, makes this like, your jaw just hits the deck here. Revelation 19, it's verses 11 through 16. Now I saw heaven opened, okay? And behold, a white horse, and he who sat on him was called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes were like a flame of fire. Sounds like Dad, doesn't it? And on his head were many crowns. He had a name written that no one knew except himself. He was clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. And the armies in heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, that's us, by the way, that's the church, followed him on white horses. Woo-hoo! Now out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should strike the nations, and he himself will rule them with a rod of iron. He himself treads the winepress of the fierceness and the wrath of Almighty God. And he has on his robe and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He's going to have a kingdom. He's going to have dominion. All right? So anyways, so upset Daniel theory number one is that Daniel didn't know Jesus had a son. Okay, so here's where verse 15 is where it actually says that he's upset. I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit within my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. So see, he's upset. I came near to one of those who stood by and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. So he's interfacing with some other character in his dream here, in his vision. Very much like John did in heaven. Anyway, so he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. And so he's going to go back through the beast here again. The great beasts, which are the four kings, which rise out of the earth, but the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. And that's that's an interesting thing. I'm going to read that last section again. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Okay, remember what I said about kingdoms. Anyways, I'll get back to that here. But here's my my upset Daniel theory number two. Okay, theory number two. This group, the saints, is the church. Okay, and this is new to Daniel. Daniel's like, who are these people? I thought we the Jews were it. I thought we were his people. We're God's people, yet there's this body of people, and I'm guessing he knows that they are not Jews. Okay, and this is the church. And so prior to the time of Christ, this Christ-church relationship was not understood, and Paul refers to it as the mystery. Okay, and so Paul refers to the mystery, and he talks about it. There's a couple of verses where he talks about Romans 16:25. And this is now to him who is able to establish you according to my gospel and the preaching of Jesus Christ, according to the revelation of the mystery kept secret since the world began. This is Paul talking. He says it. He mentions it again. He says it several times. He talks about the church as a mystery. Ephesians 5:32. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. Okay. And I found this really cool definition of mystery. And I think it really kind of ties it all up. So I'll read that to you. It says, a mystery is something which is concealed, hidden, before unknown, something into which one must be instructed before they can understand it. It does not mean that it is incomprehensible when it is disclosed, but that hitherto it has been kept secret. Daniel didn't know about the church, and that was upsetting for him, because it's almost like I'm speaking, off the cuff here, but it's almost like you thought you were that special someone to somebody, and then you see somebody else who's loved and adored by God, even though it's the Son of God, because you have to understand, Jesus and the church have this relationship. God the Father and Israel have a relationship. And he's over here, God the Father and Israel, he's in the right sphere, but he's looking at this Son of Man who I think he's realizing, and that's why I think, theory number one, why he's upset, because God has a son, and he's got a relationship with this group of people over here, which is the church. If you're born again, that's going to be us, okay? And Daniel's looking at us going, I thought I was special. You know what I mean? That's theory number two, because I still have one more theory that I'll float past here. And so I refer to this, and when I was reading verse 18 to you earlier, it says, the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever, even forever and ever. This is, you couldn't get a much better, and the church shall live happily ever after. That's it right there. And it's also the comfort level that is endued in that verse. I find it in Revelation 2, Revelation 21, verses 3 and 4. Once again, Daniel gives the rough outline. John gives you the details. Revelation 21, verses 3 and 4. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. What a beautiful picture. What a beautiful picture. Verse 19. Then I wished to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from the others. He says it over again. Exceedingly and dreadful with its teeth of iron and its nails of bronze, which devoured broken pieces and trampled the residue with its feet. The 10 horns which were on its head, and the other horn which came up, and before which 3 fell, namely the horn which had eyes and a mouth which spoke pompous words, whose appearance was greater than his fellows. And so once again, nothing new here. We know all those things, but it does just kind of summarize it. It's the fourth beast is different from the others. It's more destructive. It spans more time. We talked about the initial 10 leaders, and it's going to produce the Antichrist. Verse 21. I was watching, and the same horn was making war against the saints and prevailing against them, until the Ancient of Days came, and a judgment was made in favor of the saints and the Most High, and the time came for the saints to possess the kingdom. Okay, so making war against the saints and prevailing against them. It was interesting enough, too, once again, you jump into Revelation 17:6, and it gives more specificity. I can't say that. It's too late in the evening anyways. It's more specific, there we go, as to who's doing the war against the saints. Interestingly enough, it's a false religion, referred to as the woman. False religion, it's going to actually be the one who's going to be chopping off heads. Revelation 17:6 talks about, I saw the woman drunk with the blood of saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And then it elaborates again on that in Revelation 20, verse 4. Then I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their witness to Jesus and for the word of God, who had not worshipped the beast of his image and had not received his mark on their foreheads or their hands. And that's why you want to jump into the loving arms of God now, because if you got to get born again in the tribulation period, unless you're one of the Jews that's swept off to the wilderness in the last 3.5 years, if you're just an average Joe who gets born again, you're going to lose your head. You're going to have to give up your life. And that's what they're talking about. And this false religion is going to be the one that's going to make war against the saints. Okay? Verse 23. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms, and should devour the whole earth, trample it, and break it in pieces. So once again, it's different from all others, and it's going to bring about the destruction of the earth. And it's going to be different too. And I said this earlier, God will destroy it. Okay, whereas God didn't destroy the other ones. Verse 24. Then the 10 horns are 10 kings who shall arise from this kingdom, and another shall rise after them. He shall be different from the first ones. He shall do the 3 kings. We know all this. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times in the law, and the saints shall be given unto his hand for a time and times and a half a time. Okay, so persecute the saints of the Most High. All right, so that's the Antichrist. Once again, it talks about that in Revelation 13:7. It was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation for time and times and a half. So 3.5 years. Now, I was listening to Jack Hibbs the other day, presented a really interesting thing that I hadn't heard of. And it really, I'm going to tie it into this. Okay, it says there in verse 25, and he shall intend to change times in the law. Okay, here's what Jack Hibbs said the other day. I thought was kind of interesting. And if you don't know him, he's a Calvary Chapel teacher in California. And I was listening to him online the other day, and he said, Satan doesn't know when the tribulation is starting. And so he has to have an Antichrist ready at all times because he doesn't know when Jesus comes back. I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting. And I looked at this verse here, and shall intend to change times in the law. And it reminded me of the French Revolution. And once again, bear with me, I'm a history teacher, and I love history. And I remember back in college when I was studying the French Revolution, I was looking at history through the lens of being a Christian. And at that point, the French Revolution, there's a period called the Reign of Terror, which is run by a group called the Committee of Public Safety. And the person in charge is Maximilien Robespierre. And I think the spirit of Antichrist was in Maximilien Robespierre. And because what the Committee of Public Safety did during the Reign of Terror, all these things are like, they speak Antichrist, they speak non-God, Reign of Terror. That's so satanic. And one of the things they did, which I thought was interesting, was all church property. Well, first off, let me back up. If you're France, you're Catholic, end of sentence. That's what it was, predominantly Catholic. And so the first thing they did is they outlawed, they took all the church's property and outlawed religion, and you weren't even allowed to dress as a priest. All these are crimes. They established the cult of the supreme being, which was the state religion, and liberty and holy equality were worshipped. Gosh, that sounds like today. Now, this is what's interesting, too. The cult of reason, so they have the cult of the supreme being, and they have the cult of reason. And that was celebrated in the Paris Civic Center. The Paris Civic Center. Get this. The Paris Civic Center was Notre Dame. That big, huge cathedral, that was the Paris Civic. They basically took a house of worship and turned it into a secular thing. They had the Feast of Nature, was observed in August, so they once again, they turned to worship the creature instead of the creator. And they got rid of Sundays, too. And I thought it was interesting, too, because this is where I thought was more fascinating than anything. Maximilien Robespierre, Danton, I think, was like the elder statesman who was a part of the Committee of Public Safety, and they executed him, and then they finally execute Maximilien Robespierre, and when they do that, the Reign of Terror is over with. He was the culprit. He was the catalyst. He was the instigator. He was almost like the Antichrist of that moment. And eventually, Napoleon's going to come in. I'm not going to get too much of a history lesson here for you. And he's going to reinstate the church, but he's going to put some limits on it. But anyways, I thought that was kind of interesting. Satan doesn't know when the tribulation is, so he's always got a man ready to step into those shoes because he does know the word. Verse 26, but the court shall be seated, and they shall take away his dominion to consume and destroy it forever. And Revelation 19:20 expands out that then the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet. I think I already read this. Yeah, I read that. Sorry. And then the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High. Now, you catching that? The kingdom and dominion, greatness of the kingdoms under the whole kingdom shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. This is the end of the account. And as for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly troubled me. and my countenance changed, but I kept the matter in my heart. And so this is my upset theory number 3. I think in seeing judgment take place, I think that shook Daniel. Seeing the end of the, even though there's this glorious ending, it's basically all of humanity has just been crushed and destroyed. And I don't know about you, but if you were allowed to see judgment, there would have to be a part of you that when you came back to reality, thought about, what about those people on my left and right when I go to work tomorrow? They don't know God. They don't know his love. If they don't make the decision to accept his gift, they will see judgment. And that has got to trouble your thoughts greatly. And that's got to change your countenance. I know it did me as I was reading this and I was looking at, Daniel's upset. Daniel's upset. Why is he upset? Well, at the end of this, he's stepping back and he just saw judgment took place. Yes, he saw the beast destroyed, but he did not give us all the details, but I'm assuming he saw something very similar to what John saw. And I read you some of the details, and that had to have been, that's my, and maybe all 3 of those are reasons why Daniel was upset, but judgment itself had to be an upsetting thing. So I'm going to leave you with some questions tonight, as I always do. And so the first one is, Antichrist was known for his pompous words. And I've told you guys this before, the mouth is the vent for the heart. And so whatever's growing in the heart is vented out the mouth. And so the Antichrist, you can know him by his pompous words. How are we known? What words come out of our mouth that make us known, that people say he spoke these kind of words or she spoke those kind of words, And so that's the first question I want you to think about. The second question I want you to think about is, think back to when you got saved, and how was that road? When you became born again, and you now had to, you had to transition and tell your friends that, I'm sorry, don't do that stuff anymore. Hey, I'm different now. I'm born again. And you made that transition in your life. It depends on, maybe you were goody two shoes and there was no big transition to make, but for me, I know it was. Think about that transition, how hard that may have been. Now think about if you make that transition inside the tribulation, where the government is going to say, you can't be born again if you're going to swear allegiance to Jesus Christ and not to the beast and not take his mark, we're going to take off your head. How hard is that going to be? And that's the second thing I want you to think about. And then the third one is what we were just talking about with Daniel's third reason for being upset. I want you to think about this when you go through the week. Look around you. Look at the people that you regularly exchange words with, that you regularly talk to, you regularly hang out with. Okay. And I'm assuming if you're born again, think about judgment and think about that person, those persons that are in your life, that God has put in your life, and pray for things to say to them that can help them avoid God's wrath. Does that make sense? And so that's where we're going to end with Daniel 7. It's a sobering ending, but it's interesting. It's going to get more interesting. We're going to get into more stuff as we go here, and I look forward to it. But thanks for being with me and reading through this with me. God bless you and keep you.